My name's Stephen. I am from Aspire Games, and you are watching GenreTainment.
And here are your hosts, Marx and Julie.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to GenreTainment. This is your co-host, Marx, and joined as always with
co-host Julie. GenreTainment is where we talk about what's happening in the world of books, film, TV, and tabletop role-playing games. We give you interviews with writers, game designers, directors, producers, and actors in both independent and not-so-independent creations.
And on this episode, we have a fun interview with Stephen Kiel. He is from Aspire Games, which is releasing a Kickstarter really soon for Unbound Realms. We know him and his work best with SW5E, for fan of Star Wars and 5e. You like it. And we're also going to have a special co-host on today. So we're going to have Greg Horvey join us, which if you check out our YouTube channel, Kappa Crossing, you've seen his face a lot. So, but besides being here because he does art of the game, a lot of the genre play, behind the dice stuff, he's also on here because he's the one that introduced me to Star Wars 5e way back with his channel, Art of the Row. Art of the Game. Art of the Row, yes, sorry. Art of the Game messes me up. Art of the Row. And he's been playing 5e for a long time, Star Wars 5e or SW 5e. And before we get our guest on here, we just got to get a little bit of our stuff out of the way. So if you're listening to this episode, you probably like tabletop role-play games. So be sure to check out our channel and all the shows we have on there, which I just mentioned quite a few. Plus, like fun stuff that we do, tongue-in-cheek, like fixing the game and stuff like that, which Greg and I also do that. And don't forget to subscribe, right, Julie?
Right. If you do enjoy our episodes, which I hope you do, please consider subscribing or following us. And we have our Patreon if you would like some bonus content as well. Now, the link to that is also in the show description. Now, let's introduce our guest, Stephen Kiel, Chief Developer Officer with 8 years dedicated to crafting TTRPG content, including innovative options for D&D 5e, and spearheading a sci-fi reimagining in SW5E. His tireless endeavors converge here in his magnum opus, Unbound Realms, a testament to his passion and commitment to storytelling excellence. Yeah, good to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before we get into the SW5E and Unbound Realms, can you share with us how you started your journey as a tabletop RPG player and eventually game developer?
Sure. So I started in 3.5. This is actually immortalized in the introduction or the preface of the SW5E Player's Handbook. My buddy Ross invited me to a game pretty much on a spur of the moment, just kind of a whim. We played a lot of Magic the Gathering together. Really, really liked it. We played about 8 sessions, and then 5e came out, and we migrated over. That campaign fizzled out, but I was very entranced by it. So been playing 5e since.
The very first role-playing game I ever played actually was Star Wars, the West End game, Star Wars. So and I really think that has a special place in my heart as a classic, right? But I really think the only other Star Wars games I've really enjoyed as much is SW5E. So you did an excellent job, you and your team, on working on that. Greg, do you have any questions? Because I know you're really into the SW5E rule set.
Yeah, I have a lot of interesting questions. Well, I hope it's interesting about Star Wars 5e in general. I noticed you definitely changed some things from 5e, right? It's obviously based on 5e. And I'm curious about some of those changes. For instance, the item, let's say magic items, they're not called magic items, they're called enhanced items, right? But they're very different from 5e. 5e has very much here's a unique item that we came up with a full description and does exactly what it says, right? Whereas Star Wars 5e, I almost have a love-hate relationship with it kind of sometimes, because there is so much to the enhanced items to where you have to get a chassis of a certain type, and then you have to figure out what you can put it in, fit in that chassis and stuff like that. So I'm curious, what was this design philosophy that you moved away from 5e for those type of things?
So it should be mentioned that they're not mutually exclusive. The traditional enhanced items exist just like the ones in 5e magic items that are just,
true.
a +1 longsword, or not a longsword, but +1
Cyber
lightsaber, or things like that, right? So the modified item system was really heavily inspired by KOTOR and by Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're familiar with either of those franchises, it was like a modifying items was a big component of that. So that was a system that got developed. It's actually simpler now than it was at its start, because now it's just basically you have slots. You have 4 slots is what it starts, and then you just put any item, any mods for that item type in the slot. So any weapon, you use any weapon mods in those 4 slots, and then there's the augments, which are universal across enhanced items, and are more class based, or like ability score improvements and things like that. So it is complicated, but it's less complicated than it used to be.
Yeah. That's actually, I don't know if I played with that update, interesting enough, because it's been a while since we played Star Wars 5e, hasn't it, Marx?
It has been a while, yeah.
Yeah. But that's interesting. And is that design philosophy played into a bit of how you did it in your new system too?
Yeah. So we can marry it to that. So one of the fun things we're doing with Unbound Realms, and so this is not going to be necessarily book 1 content in the same way that modifiable items in SW5E were not book 1 content. This is something that will be coming down the road, assuming everything comes to fruition and works out the way we want it to. We're going to be doing separate, similar magic item style things like modifiable items, but one for each of the 3 casting schools. So I'm sure we'll talk about this more. In Unbound Realms, we have 15 classes. They're divided into 5 schools of 3 classes, and they each have like a very honed unifying characteristic. 3 of those are casting. So there's the traditional spellcasters. Then you have the tech casters, which use technology, and finally psycasters, which use psionics. They will each have their own unique type of magic item that only exists for their like subtype. And it really doesn't matter that much mechanically, but flavorfully, and there will be a few mechanical things that do impact it. But so we're introducing similar things to that even more.
Cool. Yeah, and I want to go ahead and put some links up here. I forget we're visual now. So this is a link to sw5e.com, all free. Lots of great info on there. And if you want to play a game setting like that, this is a great game to play. And then also I want to put your link up here. I'll also put it in descriptions of the show to your company there. So aspiregames.gg. I've never seen a GG before. What's that?
Yeah,
stand?
I was getting ready to ask that.
It's a
Good
common
game.
gaming extension. It's a great game. Is that what it stands for? It actually might.
Good game, great game, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a gaming extension. It's specifically designed for like gaming formats.
Nice. I was unaware of that. Cool. Yeah, I love that you have tech casting for 5e and stuff. I think that's great. It reminds me like in Everyday Heroes. I don't know if you're familiar with that 5e game where they have like genius points and stuff like that, where you're doing like MacGyver type stuff, but it's like kind of like magic spells, but it's themed for tech and stuff. I love that angle. And I should tell you, I played a droid in the game. I forgot the exact type of droid I was now. I don't know if you remember, Greg, but
Class 3.
Okay, and then I was raised by Mandalorians, so I made myself look like a Mandalorian, and I wanted to be a Mandalorian, and I said all the Mandalorian phrases. Obviously, this wasn't long ago for Mandalorian happened. And
yeah,
so,
we're in the Old Republic, so it didn't make complete sense, but whatever.
so that was a lot of fun, and I did a great job with. I had a lot of fun being a sniper type character with my class. So
Mandalorian armor is one of the examples of what he's talking about, where it was just the basic unique type of armor. It didn't have the enhancement stuff. It was just magic.
And there is the set item stuff too, which is something that I've been playing like video games, right? Diablo 2 is the ultimate for set items. So that's something that I want to bring back more in line with in Unbound Realms, but I want to bring it back in a way that's cleaner than I did in SW5e.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting that in D&D 5e, it's very low magic by default, right? Is your design kind of against that? You rather there be more enhanced items, magic items, stuff like that?
The magic item stuff will still be optional, air quotes, but you can get those bonuses that you would get the traditional +1, 2, 3s. You can get those through class features. For instance, the engineer is our full tech caster, similar like what you saw in SW5e. They've been rebuilt quite a bit. One of their core features is the ability to just enhance. They have 9 options out the gate, and then each of their subclasses will focus on a tool, such as a weaponsmith, and then they will have more options to enhance weapons. So that's but one of their things, so they can do the +1, 2, 3 to weapons and stuff like that.
Nice.
That's cool.
So we'll talk about your new game soon here. when you transition to that, are you going to still do anything with SW5E, or is it just going to sit there, or will there ever be any patches or updates over time?
I am personally no longer involved with SW5E.
Oh, okay.
I kind of walked away to focus a lot more on this new project a little over a year ago. I think it was November of 2023, so a year and change. So I personally have no involvement any further. I don't know if development will continue or if it's just going to stay in maintenance mode. The ideal experience to me, and hopefully people will really understand this when they get the opportunity to read and play Unbound Realms, is that Unbound Realms is just a better SW5E. It's got more versatility. It's got more classes. It's just got more. And one of the goals, one of the three pillars of Unbound Realms, if you will, is versatility. The goal being that it can work in functionally any setting. We're encouraging creators to create their own setting guides that use this rule set so they can make their own worlds. We have a couple of people actually already on board for this. And my preference would be that SW5E becomes a setting guide for this rule set because it's honestly, it's just better.
So that's interesting. So it could be used for fantasy too?
Yep. So the whole idea is that there are these 5 schools, which again have these characteristics, but most of them will work in most settings, but they might not work in all settings. So if you wanted to play let's say a futuristic game, but that's not Starstruck is a great example, right? Starstruck doesn't have traditional spellcasters, but it has psionicists and it has tech. So you could just cut the spellcasting school entirely, and then you still have 12 classes that fit and you can play with. Or you can exist in a world where all of them work. All 15 classes, all 5 schools work. So it's designed to just be heavily versatile. There is no real default setting in the same way that D&D 5e has the default setting of Forgotten Realms. If there was one, it would just be that everything exists concurrently.
Okay. So how do you deal with like the technology skill or something like that then? Because you had, I think Star Wars 5e had technology as a skill, right?
Yeah, and it still is a skill. And so the same idea, there will be a lot of guidance here talking about adapting it to a setting, is that you can deprecate the things that you don't want. The goal itself, the goal for the game is that it's very modular. So things you don't like, you can remove or just ignore if you don't want to. Changing them, we have a lot of options for changing things with variant rules. So there'll be dozens of variant rules introduced throughout the book, and then they'll be compiled in one of the appendices to modify things with real rules that exist. But for things that you don't want to exist, just ignore them.
Okay, so I'm just going to take it from a marketing perspective and stuff. Or the obvious question someone's going to ask who's listening to this, and when their Kickstarter starts, I'm sure, because with 5e, after the whole OGL debacle, right, there's been a lot of splintering off and stuff. So people are going to, and we did an episode of this and Behind the Dice, talking about these different games. Like whenever someone looks at traditional 5e and they look at some of the splinter offs like Black Flag or if it Tales of the Valiant, or they're looking at some other things that are kind of related, I guess like Daggerheart and stuff like that kind of are trying to pull D&D people. What do you feel like? What are like 3 things, whatever, that from Unbound Realms that you think stand out to be like, no, come over here, get away from Daggerheart and this game and that?
It's funny that you choose 3 things because I mentioned 3 pillars earlier. So this is going to be a little bit verbose, but Unbound Realms is rooted in 5e. Now, all of the mechanics taken from 5e are part of the OGLs and the SRD, I'm sorry. So they will be usable in perpetuity. And then we're going to create our own OGL, again, to encourage people to create their own settings. But the idea is that anybody who's played 5e and has any reasonable understanding of the game would be able to pick up Unbound Realms very quickly. The things that we do better, in my mind, are customization. So the idea is that you have way more options for customization than you do in traditional 5e. Feats are baked directly into classes now. They're split into major and minor feats. Every character from 1 to 20 will get 9 feats for free as a part of leveling. They don't have to choose. They choose from feats, but they don't have to choose instead of ASIs. So that's one thing that's great. Every class has customization baked into it. Invocation systems, they're all unique to each of the classes. We have trait points, which are used to generate new species and backgrounds. We have calculators, so you can do this very quickly. You get traits from your class, and you also get more traits as you level. And these are all separate from like the invocations and feats. There are the sub-customization options, like fighting styles have been dramatically expanded. We introduced casting styles, battle forms, and there's going to be a lot more in subsequent books as well. So customization is something we do much better than traditional 5e, and we also do it better than 2024, in my mind. Of course, I'm writing the rules. Of course, I think that. Modularity is the second one, which I touched on previously. The goal is that you can ignore things you don't like that don't have ripple effects, right? Certain mechanics will be tied to each other, so you need to pay attention to all of them. But we're going to introduce a lot of variant rules so you can adjust things to your table. For instance, one that I've been tweaking is casting failure in armor. If you ever played like the old Baldur's Gate games or 2E in general, there used to be a chance to fail when casting a spell while wearing armor. That rule is coming back as a variant rule, and it's designed in such a way that the paladin-esque half-caster isn't really impacted by it, but the wizard is.
Mm-hmm.
So those are, again, other ways to tweak the game to your table. And then finally, that versatility, which is emphasizing setting. So like Unbound Realms can work for a high fantasy setting. It could work for a current day modern setting. It could work for the space opera like Starstruck or Star Wars 5e, or Star Wars, I'm sorry, Wild West, right? The idea is that it works for any of these settings.
Can I ask a less technical question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we keep talking about Unbound Realms. Do you think maybe you could explain to people what that is and how the idea came about?
So it was actually broached by one of my moderators from SW5E who thought about this idea of making it more setting agnostic, right? Going in a different direction. So this whole idea kind of came to fruition. It was while I was already kind of like getting tired of developing at SW5E. So it was a great way to start channeling my creative output. The name actually was suggested. So we had a different name. One of our partners left, and our name was an acronym, and it was great. But when we brought on this new partner who has been doing a great job, I don't remember where we came up with. I think it was just like a list of names that we kind of looked at, and then Unbound Realms is great. I love the acronym UR. It looks so good on our logo, which I don't know if you can show, but it's a padlock with the padlock open up. It's a U and an R together. Like it's just such a great name. Like
I'll try to stick it on the thumbnail for this.
Yeah. We have our cover mock-up, which is AI art. Sorry, it's for now. It's not going to be, but like it showcases the logo for the game, which I'm very, very fond of.
Gets you started.
Yep.
Yeah. So I do like how your disclaimer was written, where it's like, hey, we're gonna hire people. This is just for promotional purposes right now. So I think that was well done.
Yeah.
And to explain to people what you mean by you got tired of Star Wars 5e, he put out for I think 5 years straight, every Thursday, I think it was, you put out a whole rule set for something new, right? For 5 years straight.
That's what I got tired of. And it was mostly like character options, right? Species, background, subclass, stuff like that. And like that schedule was just draining. It was
and
hard.
It wasn't just like, here's a document. It was like, here's a nicely formatted, properly, TTRPG page of stuff.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks to the guys at GM Binder for that. That's a very helpful platform.
GM Binder?
GM Binder. Interesting.
Yeah, it's just a website that lets you type and render pages like that. The entire, all the books I wrote for SW5E were done in GM Binder. And right now, as I write for Unbound Realms, I'm doing it in GM Binder again. We won't use that for like the final product. It'll be done in, I think, InDesign. I don't. That's not my forte, but it helps me because I'm a very visual writer, and it also I structure page by page. One thing that's always kind of annoyed me with 5e and TTRPGs in general is when you have to turn a page for no reason. Like all the text could be contained on one page, but instead it's spread across a page and a half or 2 pages or whatever. That's always annoyed me. So I tried to like kibosh that.
Edit in, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you plan to? So it's interesting because most systems like 5e, but most systems they put out core rules and then they put out, Dungeon Master Guide, Monster if they want, but it's all kind of core rules. But then they put out modules, right? So it sounds like yours is going to be more like, here's the cool rules, and now here's variants of how to use these core rules to do different variants for what your liking is, and then maybe also modules, maybe. But
so the goal, we have a 6-book track is the plan, and the first 2 books are locked in stone. The last 4 are up for debate. So the first book is that player's handbook. So it mimics. It's very similar to how 5e is. It's just the core rules to play the game. That's the most important part. Build characters, customization options, etc. The second book is, if you played Star Wars or SW5e, you probably really like the Starship stuff. If you watched a Starstruck Odyssey on Dimension 20, which used my SW5e rules, like the Starship, the worst, was awesome, right? And that combat was so fun. That's coming back as well. But we're also developing it in such a way that it can work for more than just starships. It can work for airships or ships on the sea. We've got different scaling options and stuff. So that's going to be the second book. The last 4 will focus on, not necessarily in this order, but the first one will be like cities and enhanced items, similar to what you saw in SW5E's Wretched Hives. That will be the big focus of that. Downtime, factions, things like that. The 4th book, air quotes, will be strongholds for building your own bases and maintaining them, staffing them, mass combat, stuff like that. The fifth book, let's make sure I can get this right, is going to be, well, the fifth book, again, air quotes, is going to be focused on character options and monsters and monstrous options for characters. So like vampirism is one that I've been playing with. Vampirism will be introduced in a book that's designed to add character options and monsters. And then the final book is going to focus mostly on customization stuff, and then also way more, like you mentioned, those modular rules like variants, just ways to tweak the game. So there is no plan at this juncture to create a dedicated DM's guide, because instead I think having those rules tied, having the modularity tied to the rules themselves in where they should exist is a better approach for me personally. And I might be wrong, and that might change down the road, but that's the plan right now.
So the plan is to just put out books. You're not planning to do the weekly Thursday release for
At this point, no. We may. Sorry, my cat is being disruptive.
Allergies.
We may do something like that where it'll be more likely that I do preview rules. So I might have. In fact, I jump around a lot, so I have written rules that are not going to come out for 3 or 4 books, but those might get previewed early on a Patreon or on the Discord, so people can like play with them and fiddle with them and say these suck or these are awesome or these need to do this instead. There will be a lot of that, but it will not be a regular weekly like character option cadence like I did with SW5E.
Are you okay with people streaming it, or are you trying to keep it private?
If you feel prepared to stream it, go for it. One of the things to consider is like there's a lot of little minor things so that things don't necessarily pair 1-to-1 to 5e, and we don't have monsters generated for it yet. We will have some when we release the book, but it won't be a massive endeavor, because while monsters from 5e can work, there are just adjustments you have to make. For instance, armor functions differently in Unbound Realms than it does in 5e, which I posted about. It adds damage reduction instead of increasing your AC. So there are things like that would have to be considered and tweaked as you introduce monsters. You could conceptually ignore those, and a lot of times you can just ignore it, but there are times when it will matter.
Cool.
We'll have to join the Discord and see, because we do a lot of actual plays and stuff, and we've been doing that with DC-20, for example, and this would be a good game to try that out too, if you like. This would be a fun experiment, if you don't mind, Stephen. Julie, why don't you think of a character? Make up a character. Maybe it's one of your characters you already played, and tell him about it. And then how would you build that character roughly?
That's interesting.
Character in what?
It could be one of your pre-existing characters from genre play if you want, or something else. Just think. You can just take one of your genre play characters. You could take the Call of Cthulhu character you used.
That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah, I thought so. So why don't you explain that character to Stephen, and then who has no idea about the mechanics of his character or anything, and he can give us an idea like how that character would be built in his game. Is that cool?
Okay. Her name was Anna Louise, and she was a gunslinger. It was down darker trails, so it took place in the Wild West. And she was a gunslinger. So I'm not sure how
like what some of the skills sets she had, like what she could do, because he'll need to help him out.
Well, she was a great shot. She had quick draw. And what was that other? Once. Yeah, I could shoot 2 guns at once. Had quick draw, and I can't remember.
Yeah, you had the whip.
Yeah,
I had a whip.
Oh yeah, I mean that one's for species. I'm assuming you're a human, but so we will have like a defined human species. But if you also have other species, or you want to tweak human so that everybody's not playing the exact same human, that's something that can be very easily done in Unbound Realms. As far as background, so background is kind of like what you do, but not necessarily how you do it. You could be a bounty hunter, a mercenary, you could just be a cowpoke, whatever your title is. Very easy and very robust customization, similar to how the species calculator works. You can do that with background. So you get a free feat as a part of it, things like that. For class, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. If you're like looking for that one precise shot, you just take a single shot to the dome and it's just lights out, right? Operative obviously jumps out really good for that. If you like having more tricks or trick shots, things like, shoot them and they fall over type of deal, champion is probably the best. Champion is very similar to fighter. Operative is very similar to rogue. Those are probably the 2 best class options off the top of my head for your fighting style of using guns. So there are 3 really solid ones for this build. There's the sharpshooter, which is a long range style designed to shoot for targets over 30 feet, which would be probably more appropriate for a rifle, but it would work for pistols too. And And then snapshot is the closer one where it's designed for those targets within 30 feet. And then finally, there's the dual wield. So you could dual wield pistols more effectively. And you can mix and match those. You don't have to choose the same. Each of the fighting styles has three pieces to it: the dabble, the practice, the technique. You can mix and match. So if there's some combination that looks better to you, you can do that. So that's a very common. The dual wield pistol arrow thing is a very common one that I wanted to enable very effectively.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's cool. I noticed that you did, when you showed some of the classes from your previews, like you said, you have ASI, which is just you get to add +1 to something.
Correct.
You have the minor feat and a major feat. And so you're basically increasing an ability score, getting a minor feat or getting a major feat almost every level, right? Not every level, but it's like you skip 1 or 2 here and there. But I'm curious, could you give examples of what a minor feat might be like and what a major feat might be like?
Sure. Yeah. So you get a minor feat as with your background. So you get one at first level, and then you get a minor feat at 6, 10, 14, and 18. So you get 5 total. And then you get a major feat at 4. Did I say? I said 1, 6, right? So 4, 8, 12, 16. So those are the feats you get, 9 for free. A minor feat is typically less directly impactful. When talking about TTRPGs, you have those 3 pillars of combat, exploration, social. Combat is really where the most grit is. It's where the mechanics are really the most heavily emphasized, and so most things engage with combat because it's the place to have the most mechanics. The minor feats don't touch on combat as much. Typically, some of them might give you like greater weapon proficiencies or like let you reroll a weapon damage die, things like that. Most of them are focused on like granting flavorful abilities or like skill proficiencies. And there's minor feats that grant skill expertise, just like there are in 5e. So those are big ones. But most of them are not super impactful on combat, even if they are a little bit. And then major feats are the opposite. Major feat is like your great weapon mastery is like the power level I expect from most greater feats. So those are in Unbound Realms. We're going to have a lot like that, and that example is actually a fighting master or fighting technique. I'm sorry, is what it's called. But then there's a feat called fighting technique, which lets you pick from one of the 40 we have. So it's basically just the impact on combat is how it boils down.
Is the Great Weapon Master one still -5 plus 10 damage?
All of the technique interact with proficiency bonus. So instead, it's minus proficiency or forego proficiency and then add double. So it starts at 2, -2 plus 4, scales to -6 plus 12.
Yeah, that's nice.
Cool. Is there like a meta point system, like inspiration or something else in this game?
Inspiration is something I've been toying with. I'm not sure about the generation, right? Because inspiration in 5e is basically like the DM says so. One of the ways that I've always run it is at the end of a session, you give inspiration to whoever the player you think was most outstanding in that session. That's one of the ways that my tables really enjoyed that. So I'm going to offer some opportunities, and then inspiration will be, this is another great example of a keyword. So we have a keyword called repeat. And what a repeat is when you fail like an ability check, a saving throw, or an attack roll, you can re-roll it. You can repeat it. And everything that affected the initial roll affects the new roll. So that's a trigger word. That's what inspiration will do in Unbound Realms is when you fail one of those, you can just repeat it for free. There's no, you don't have to use a reaction or anything. We're also looking at some that will let you just expend inspiration to recover your school resource. So every school has that unifying characteristic. They all have a resource. You can use inspiration to recover a resource instead, and you can do that at any time for free. And then there will probably be more options, but those are the ones that will be the most likely. And then we'll have options for how to gain them. Probably cap it so you can only ever have one, but I think that's fine.
Cool.
Are you planning to do all the? Because I know in Star Wars 5e you weren't. I can tell you probably weren't a fan of spell slots, and you have instead a pool, right? Are you planning to do that for all the casting classes, basically?
So the tech casters will look very similar to SW5e. They get fewer points. Those points recharge on a short rest. The psi casters are similar to the force casters from SW5e. They get more points. Those points recharge on a long rest. The full spellcasters are back to that traditional spell slot where you have a specific, we call them degree instead of level. And then they're all prepared casters. So they get fewer spells ready to go, but they get way more spells that you can prepare. So they all kind of use a spell book, but it can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be a spell book. It could be a talisman if you're a cleric, or it could be your sword if you're a paladin, whatever. So that's how they'll function a little bit differently. So each of the 3 casting types, will they use the same kind of core mechanic of I cast this spell or I cast this power? They all have very flavorful differences.
That's cool. Yeah, very different.
I guess another thing too. So the rules of 5e or Creative Commons used to be OGL, all that stuff with the OGL, right? What kind of license, or if you have a license besides where you're getting inspiration from, I don't know, are you looking at for this game?
We'll have an OGL. We'll have our own open gaming license. The goal will basically be that you can use, but you can't repeat. Ironic using that word again, right? You can't just wholesale copy text from our stuff to yours, but you can absolutely use it otherwise. We're encouraging. I want a very open gaming system. I want everybody to play my game, but the idea is that it's going to be so versatile and there are going to be so many character options that you can play it across so many settings that you can play this game over and over again, and it's not going to feel the same every time beyond just like the core mechanics.
And are there any settings you're working on developing, or is it going to be just kind of GURPS at first and you just apply it to different settings, or what do you think?
The game itself will, again, be setting agnostic in that the mechanics can work in any setting. I personally am a very strong, toot my own horn, I'm a strong technical writer. I'm a very weak creative writer. If you asked me to write a story, it would be the worst thing you'd ever read. You'd want to cut your eyes out. So I do not have the capacity to write a setting guide personally. One of my partners has expressed interest in doing that. And then we have also made a few external contacts who are all interested in creating their own setting guides that will come out hopefully around the same time. We've been talking about aligning Kickstarters for that reason. But they're going to create their own setting guides. So that's the idea, is that everybody can create their own. And then they'll just have dozens and dozens of these different settings you can play this one game in.
That's cool.
That's cool. Maybe we'll have to create one if we try out the game.
We could, yeah. What about playing non-human stuff? Like, for example, we this is extreme example for any game, but like we played in Fate Secrets of Cats, where we played magical cats, and of course I'm thinking about that a lot as I see your cats. Is that possible in your game?
Oh, it's very possible. So okay. 15 is becoming one of the magic numbers in Unbound Realms. So there's 15 classes, there are 15 damage types, there are 15 creature types. So we're going to enable across all these books a playable. You're going to be able to play any creature type you want, and so that means that we won't necessarily generate the species for you. Like we won't necessarily generate a cat person or a magic cat or whatever, but the rules will be there, and then you have the species generation rules, so you can create it yourself. We're also going to create the types as a template. So like undead will have a template that you can just slap on top of an existing species. So if you want to play an undead elf, you just choose your elf and you just slap undead on top of that, and you get some perks and you get some penalties, and you are good to go. So that is something that I very much want to engage. And we're also going to do some real weird stuff. Like you can play you can play a gelatinous ooze type of deal. That will be a playable option. Like basically you can't use equipment. It's going to be very very thematically limited. But like that is something we want to enable. We want all that weird stuff. If it should be viable, it will be.
Nice.
Be the ooze in Orville.
Yeah.
I played
an Orville RPG and we had a ooze. So.
we need another season of that. That last season went so hard.
Aren't they releasing another season now? I think I heard that they are planning to now.
I hope so, man.
They're working on it now.
I love it.
Yeah.
What was that, Julie? Sorry.
Said your lips to God's ears.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to see. So what's the Kickstarter? Do you have like a launch date yet, or are you just building up and waiting to kind of see how that goes?
We're basically just trying to get enough of an interest ahead of time to make sure we can fund. So that's where we're at right now. The goal is April. I don't have a firm date, but at this point, we're planning for April.
And please let me know when you know, and I'll try to schedule this around that time.
Sure.
Do you, Greg, get any other questions? Real questions?
Yeah, I was just curious. Is the action economy, you'd say, very similar to 5e, or at least similar to Star Wars 5e?
So the literal action economy of you have an action, you have a bonus action, you have a reaction, you have an object interaction. That's the same. The goal is that you capitalize on it way more. So one of the things I did in SW5e that a lot of people really didn't like this, but I love it, was the idea of using your reaction proactively, right? So you get two features that let you do something as a bonus action. Instead, you can do it as a reaction on your turn. Right, so it lets you use reaction instead of waiting for an opportunity attack or counterspell, and then you'll also be able to shrink it to object interaction at higher levels. So it's the same 4 potential things you can do, and it's everybody has obviously everybody has an action. Everybody has something to do with their bonus action. Everybody has something by second level.
Second level.
So everybody has every class has something to do with a bonus action, right?
Correct,
it has a bonus action option. Okay.
Yeah, so there's fighting styles and casting styles, and the first thing right out the gate is it gives you a new bonus action. So like there's one that's dedicated to the dash action, right? Which makes you just got to go fast, right? So there's that fighting style will give you that as a bonus action. And then if you could already do it as a bonus action, like a rogue, you can instead do it as a reaction on your turn. So that's, everybody has a bonus action. I think by second level, maybe by third level, but everybody gets one.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Because we had a video not too long ago talking about how Professor DM is hating on bonus actions, and but that was one of the things we thought would be a fix. So that's good to hear. So
I'd be curious about that. I hate the name. I've been trying desperately to give it a new name. We're currently calling it a minor action, but really I want it to not say the word. I don't want it to include the word action. Bonus action is so confusing justifiably because it sounds like it's an extra action you're getting to do one thing, but that's not the case. I have been looking for a better word.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, think about that.
Now my brain is stuck on that.
I've looked at thesauruses, right? So I want every word to include the word action. So it's like your major action, your minor action, currently reaction, object interaction. So I want something, but there's nothing. I've looked and like I might just make something. Maybe I'll call it a contra action. I don't know. That's a terrible name, but something like that.
Yeah. Is there like a word that just means like it's attached onto something else? It's like enhances something else. An enhancement action? That sounds weird. Never mind.
One of the things we're doing though as well is there's a lot less that you have to do your action to you do your bonus action. So like 2-weapon fighting still forces that at the gate, but you can change it down the road. But like monk, our mystic for us no longer has to attack first to do the unarmed strike as a bonus action. They can just do that.
I see.
So I want to untether those a lot. The idea is just shrinking, right? Your action takes up the most time, but as you get better at things, you can instead do it as a bonus action, take a little bit less time. We also have like an action points variant that you can use instead. So your action, you have 6 points, and instead of so if you played Divinity, any Original Sin or Original Sin 2, absolutely love these games, absolute diehard Larian fan. So you have 6 points, similar to that. I think you only have 4. I don't know. But your action is 3 points, your bonus action is 2 points, your reaction is 1 point. And you get 6 points at the start of your turn, and you'll be able to carry over points to subsequent turns. This is one of our modular variants.
Nice.
Oh, wow. So you could do 2 major actions in that case, right? Because you have 6 points.
There would be a restriction that if you would do 2 major actions, you can't do the same major action twice. So you couldn't do cast. You can't do double fireball and give up everything.
But you could potentially make I don't want to say Force User, a psionic that has a sword, and they could like psionic and then sword.
You could fireball and then attack action, and that's all you can do. And you no more reaction, so no more counterspell, no more opportunity attack. You lose all that until your next turn.
Right.
Nice. I like that. Really it seems to be DC 20, Pathfinder 2E. The action economy is something that seems to be a good direction.
I've never played Pathfinder. I've never played Starfinder. Never played any. Literally, I've never played except for like the Star Wars narrative ones, like Edge of the Empire. I've never played anything but 5e and 3.5e. And everybody's like, "You're just creating Pathfinder again." It's like, well, maybe, but no.
Oh man, it's not Pathfinder.
No,
Actually, what I liked about Star Wars 5e, it did pull in what felt like elements of Pathfinder, though obviously not because you never played, but in a good way, because there were good things about Pathfinder that I thought 5e completely simplified to the point that it didn't make sense, and it made it harder to understand because it didn't make sense.
Pathfinder, one of the things I've heard is flat mods, where everything you do scales so high that it trivializes things. We're much more strict on that. What I've referred to as the golden formula, but it's traditionally called bounded accuracy, is a lot harsher in Unbound Realms. While you have more ways to get additional modifiers, you can't stack them indefinitely like you could otherwise. Like, for instance, when you make an attack roll, you add your strength modifier to it, right? There are ways to add a second modifier, maybe your wisdom to it, but that's it. If you add those 2, you can't add any more. So we do a lot of things like that.
Yeah, you can only do expertise once, stuff like that.
Exactly like expertise, right? Expertise is proficiency twice, and then that's it. You're done with proficiency.
Is it still 20 levels?
Yep, still going with 20. And we'll also have like rules for epic level 6 and epic level probably 10, I think, are the 2 that I've been looking at, which if you're not familiar, just means the game stops then, which doesn't really require much rules in that way, but yeah.
So I guess another question that a lot of people would probably say if they're coming from a different game system is like, is this compatible at all with any of my 5e books? Like if I don't have the monster book yet, but I have a monster manual over here, whatever, could I be able to use those monsters in some way in your game?
This is another fun one, right? So there are some things, like I mentioned before, how armor is different, but you could ignore that for your monsters. It's simpler. Action economy is probably the biggest issue between. This is an issue in 5e with monsters anyway. Is that whoever has the most action economy wins. So you have to give your monsters bonus actions. And so one of the things we're also doing, and this is something that I will release with the book, but it's not going to be in the book, it's going to be in a later one, is monster rolls. So you can just slap a roll on a monster and it gives it a new bonus action, potentially an aura, potentially a new reaction. But the goal is that you could take a pack of wolves and they're not all the same stat block. You have a wolf that might be a more support oriented that like tries to, heal its friends or whatever. And you have one that's a tank that taunts the other creatures around it to focus on it instead, right? These are things that we're going to do.
That's a great idea.
That you can slap onto. Yeah, modularity is like the biggest word to me, as I've said it probably 150 times today. I really want people to just be able to layer things on and just make whatever they want. They make the most ridiculous burger of Unbound Realms content they can.
Do you have any thoughts about sometimes when you have a big baddie, it does get frustrating. They only get one turn between all the other player turns.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've got rules for that.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what the rules are now. There's more to it, but so villain is what I call that, and basically a villain functions as multiple monsters, but they don't all act on the same turn. So you choose frenzy or fatigue out the gate. A creature that fatigues instead starts really strong and gets weaker as the fight progresses, and frenzy is the opposite. As the fight progresses, they get more powerful, and so they just take extra turns or lose extra. A creature that fatigues takes extra turns, but then loses them as the fight progresses. And vice versa with a creature that frenzies. And then there's more to it than that I won't spoil today. But this is another thing that I will release out the gate, but it's not going to be in this book. It'll be in the monster one.
That's a cool idea.
Great idea. Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's something that's in video games a lot with bosses and stuff, but I've never seen it really applied to.
Well, you have to have tension somehow. And the two ways you do tension in 5e, because everyone has to homebrew this because their monsters kind of suck. But like you have to homebrew it to where it's, you either have them do massive damage out of the gate and it makes people go, oh my God, this is a pain. Or you have to make it so they see some impending doom timer, right? There's the two ways to build tension. Yep. But there's nothing like that in 5e. You have to homebrew that.
Yep. So this is another way to make bosses more fun, more engaging without having to use mooks. And we'll still include like legendary monsters too that instead have that like legendary action system. I'm not as married to it. And like legendary reactions, which I kind of hate and most people kind of hate. But yeah, really the goal is I just want people to make this game their own, and no two tables should be the same.
I like that. We had an Art of the Game episode talking about boss fights, and that would have been a great thing to talk about because that was
I wish I thought of it, to be honest.
All right, awesome. Well, this interview's been really, really great. Kickstarter is in the works. I think I don't really have a good link, but if you just search Unbound Realms RPG, or I don't have a small link. I'll be a link in description notes, but not for this.
You shared it, the aspiregames.gg. The link is right there on the front.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you can go there to the company website and you'll find it right there too. So I wish you all the luck with the Kickstarter. I've done a couple Kickstarters. They're a lot of fun, a lot of work, but they're a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we're giving ourselves a lot of time on this one because I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. The writing part I got down, but it's the making it into a book and like printing it at a large scale, which actually I've done a bit of that too with buying my own books. I have probably a dozen copies of the SW5e Player's Handbook in my house. So that we're giving ourselves a lot of time for that reason.
Yeah, well, I think it's good. I've heard I don't do that myself very much. I need to do it more with our Kickstarters, but setting up a lot of pre-launch. So you get a certain number of, I don't know what your target number is, but you get a certain target number you try to reach before you launch to help.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. Because if you have a strong launch, it really helps with the Kickstarter a lot. So
momentum is so important. That's like everything I've read about launching a successful Kickstarter is about momentum. If you stagnate, you're dead.
Yeah, it's big help. So I think that's smart. Do you, I guess before we go with your Kickstarter, is there anything, can you tell us anything about stretch goals, or is it too early to say anything like that? I mean, not specific numbers, but some ideas of stuff you might have for a stretch goal or something else besides the 6 core books, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So the stretch goal out the gate, this is something we've been talking about internally, is like doing secondary merchandise. We've talked about doing a more premium, like a premium hardcover. I don't have enough. We'll have some free content that goes alongside the campaign that you get just for following it and stuff like that. And we will have some free, I think most of it, what it will be is like extra feats or extra traits for backgrounds and species and stuff like that. But it's not going to go in the book. What it will be is just content you get in addition out the gate for free. And then it will go in a later book. That's the very likely scenario.
All right,
We
cool.
could do like a magazine.
Yeah, and we're thinking. I mean, we've got so many ideas like that. And like one of the like, I have a feat chain of, I think it's 20 feats offhand, but it's just a resource swapping feat. So when you choose, if you multi-class a spellcaster with a psionicist, it lets you just swap out your resources. You have to do something. You can't do it for like instantaneously, but like it's feats like that is something I'll give away for free. But yeah,
Like a
there's so much.
sorcerer. Yeah,
Say it again.
a sorcerer can do that. I think, right? They can do the sorcery
do
points. But
Correct. Yeah. So this would be like changing your psi points or for tech points or vice versa. Or even like one of the schools is called the Focused, and they have focus points, kind of like a monk. And you could swap your focus for a spell slot.
oh wow,
So things like,
That's
and
cool.
there's a feat for every combination.
that's awesome. I love feats. I like feats and skills. Those are my two favorite things in any TTRPG.
We do have 20 skills, so there's a couple more. Constitution finally has a skill called Endurance. Every skill has what I refer to as an attack replacer. I know we're just going to keep going. Attack replacer. So like grapple, push, shove. There's something like that for every skill. Yep.
That's cool.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I feel like we could go hours talking
Literally,
about rules. So, but we'll definitely keep in touch with it. I think it would be great to try it out as an actual play, one of our genre plays, and maybe do a behind the dice after that, talking a little more about what we thought about the rules and stuff. And good luck with the Kickstarter. Looking forward to seeing what y'all do with the game. So,
Thank you very much.
before we go, just to remind everybody, where can they find you again? Just to say it verbally here.
Spiregames.gg. Yeah, there we go, right there. Or at Gallifile on, that was my prior name. I guess you didn't see that. GALIPHILE on basically every social platform.
Nice.
Thanks so much for being on the show, Stephen. And we hope everyone enjoyed the show. And if you're interested in Unbound Realms or SW5E games, please check out the link in the show notes. And please let us know if you enjoyed this episode and what other guests you might like us to have in the future.
Yep. I think that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks, everyone, especially our special guest host, Greg, and our guest, Stephen. So good luck with the Kickstarter. And I think that's a wrap for today's episode. So until
next time.
Bad monkey.